At Marvel, there was a tradition to have an annual crossover event. Age of Apocalypse was different because the concept was so cool that everybody wanted to play.
I don't think I ever saw an overview. It was that loose. The thing with Age of Apocalypse is it's basically taking the maxim of all power corrupts and running with it. But it also, at the same time, was really sort of happening, but in this alternate universe.
I liked the idea of our heroes fighting for a very apocalyptic future. You're trying to save the world, but the world's all destroyed. So what are you really fighting for? And what you're really fighting for is humanity.
When Age of Apocalypse came out, I wasn't a regular reader of X-Men. So I heard about it happening and I was like, wait, what? What's happening? Like, they're getting rid of all the X-Men books? What do you mean?
This was a Marvel who, at that point, was a very successful publishing company, had a great role in the market, but was still willing to shake things up creatively and to take these kind of risks with what at that point was our best-selling franchise.
The audacity of just stopping the entire line and not letting you know that it was ever coming back. We were gobsmacked by this idea. We have a half a dozen super successful books that are carrying the line. Let's just cancel those for 4 months.
They're going to change everything across the board. All the books went away, they're replaced with something new. I don't think it had ever been done before. People couldn't believe it. They had to believe it because it was right there in front of them, and they didn't know if it was ever going to go back.
It meant anything goes. Anyone could die, anyone could fall in love, any way we wanted to change it up. Everything that you had come to know and love about the X-Men, out the window.
The premise of the Age of Apocalypse is it's a world where Charles Xavier never existed, or Charles Xavier's life was prematurely ended. His son Legion ends up going back in time, accidentally killing him. And as a result, with no Charles Xavier, there's nobody to stop the rise of Apocalypse. Bob Harris was editor-in-chief of the X-Men franchise. The initial concept came from Bob, and then Fabian and Scott and Jeff really took that ball and ran with it. He did just sort of call out that initial key, come up with the initial story premise, and then stood back and let his writers sort of really take it and make something of it.
We all had a big X-Men conference. It was Jeff Loeb and Scott Lobdell and Bob Harris and myself and a dozen other people who were working on the X-Men books at the time.
What made that summit so unique was that Scott had the overall picture. He knew where we needed to end, and he knew each character had sort of a job.
It was this great sort of jazz improvisation. You were making it up as you went along and riffing on everybody else's riffs. It was really good because it gave a lot of top creative people at that time free rein to just run with their imaginations.
Everybody was kind of flying by the seat of their pants and making things up as they go. Sometimes that's a great way to creatively come up with new ideas.
For a lot of the artists, it was very liberating to say, you don't have to go with the same visual that the characters had for 30 years. Do something fresh on it, whether that's, reflecting the fashion of the time or just, you always thought this character would look better this way. And that energy is something else that shows up on the page and helps make the story that much more exciting.
This is really where Joe Mattiera just exploded. Chris Pacello, what the Kuberts were doing, being able to see characters that were new and broke out and, like Blink came from no place and Morph. The idea that Sabretooth was a good guy and Wildchild was like his dog.
I think it was a little bit of borrowing of the Mad Max paradigm of this is a darker world, it is a less polished world, and so let's reflect that in the way the costumes look and the way the characters carry themselves and in the sort of scruffiness of a lot of these costumes.
Taking someone like Scott to start at a place where he was the leader of the worst group of mutants that we'd ever seen, and that he was literally a Cyclops. I don't know that we actually ever said it, that the reason why he lost that eye was because Wolverine had cut it out. And that was also how Wolverine lost his hand. I remember having lots of conversations about never saying that's what happened and that you just had to put that together on your own.
The design of Age of Apocalypse Wolverine, I could tell you exactly like it happened yesterday. I got a call from Bob Harris and he says, I'm going into a meeting in 20 minutes. Could you fax me a quick sketch of Wolverine? I need it for a meeting. We got to pitch this, that, or the other thing. I did the worst drawing of Wolverine And then at the last minute, I said, I'm just going to cut his arm off and put like a stump with a metal thing on the end of it. Sent it in, and for some reason they loved it. And that was my big contribution to the Age of Apocalypse storyline.
I would send stuff to Adam, and it was like he was reading my mind or something. It always looked much like how I pictured it. It was always a joy to get the pages. There was always this sort of enthusiasm in the office. Everybody would come from other offices, or you'd go to somebody else's office. Hey, look, these pages came in. It was like, holy smoke! That's a lot of fun to see it all click together like that.
For a lot of people, their first exposure to the event was going in to the comic shop that week to pick up their latest issue of X-Men and finding that it was something completely different. That was part of what made this such an impactful event. We had people who were like, don't go back to the old continuity.
Boy, I remember the hue and cry, and there were fans who loved it, but there were fans who were just out for blood because we'd taken away their precious Kitty and Colossus.
People were scared by it, but then they read the comics and they went, well, this is great. Like this is a new version of all the characters I love, and everything is weird. Why is it weird?
The Age of Apocalypse, while it's not Xavier's dream of humans and mutants living together, coexisting peacefully, it is Magneto's dream. It's a lot of mutants' dream. It's like us on top, the humans on the bottom. And it's one of those careful what you wish for things.
The entire world are against these people because they're different. That's so relatable to almost everybody. It's that wideness of the spectrum, that wonderful universal relatability that makes it work. Because it's all stuff that we see firsthand in our lives.
The X-Men, at its core, is always pushing back on the fear of the other. Mutants and humans coexisting in peace might as just well be different races, different religions, different sexual orientations living in peace. Those people are ultimately what makes society the strongest and ultimately what's going to be the salvation of society. It's always been the heart of the franchise, and the characters in the Age of Apocalypse who still carry on that dream are the ones that we identify with.
When you have a lot of complex characters in a complex universe, you have to let them evolve. Because if they're not evolving, they're dead.
Nobody's cheering for Apocalypse to win. You're cheering for Magneto, you're cheering for Rogue, you're cheering for the people who are trying to overthrow an unjust regime and trying to end prejudice and end hate and have tolerance and love and acceptance be the things that sort of triumph in the world.